we went into the year being hyper aware of how tough this year would be, right? And so we entered being clear that the sort of three main areas to focus on was around ensuring that as our families face the challenges of COVID, around health, safety, loss of income, and the sort of ongoing racial violence and oppression that scholars are aware of. How do we set adults up to be able to help families sort of go through the physical, emotional, and the social foundations needed to even begin to engage in learning, right? And so we started there and said, given what we know is happening socially, what do we need to do? And the second part of that is really around the idea of helping folks navigate the uncertainty, right? One week we hear news and like, what does that mean? And so there's so much changing. We know it meant that scholars might have to move to live with someone else. And so with that in mind, we began this idea of ensuring that every single learner had a champion, right? We've heard that historically, but for this year, we took that into practice and designed a framework we called success coaching, right? This is not a Brooklyn Lab sort of a lone thing. We partner with a set of organizations, Turnaround for Children, Transcend, City Year, ASU. And the idea was really to think about how do we make sure our scholars, our families have a person whose entire job and role is to make sure they receive answers and they receive support, right? And so a success coach is functionally a person who is specifically focused on the relationships, on the routines, and also ensuring the sort of building the resilience to go through a year like we've had. And so when we thought about, for example, sixth graders who will start in middle school, right? It's a scary time, right? And to be able to say each morning, I have an adult who's checking in with me, not just about school, right? But saying, how are you today? How are you feeling? What are things that you need help with today? And to have that adult be consistent, right? Same person, right? So whether you had an issue with logging into a classroom, you have the one person you go to. If it's a tech issue that you ran into, that's the person. If you need a Metro card to get to school, it's that same person. So like that allows us to be able to tighten our community, and that allowed us to be able to start to see, where the needs are. So sort of fast forward a little bit into how that became a bright spot. It became a process that let us know very quickly that we needed to change our model, right? We heard very quickly like, hey, for families, a single person is the model. We don't need 10, 15 folks calling, and it's a lot to manage through. So having a single point of access was valuable. It also let us know that we needed to adjust learning models, right? There are places where the expectation is that you turn on your camera, right? That could be a hindrance for families who might not want to put the camera on that day. So what are other ways we're checking in with scholars? And success coaching has allowed us to be able to survey scholars and say, hey, what can we actually do to help you? Right. And scholars being able to say, hey, I said this to my success coach, right? And I've said it again. And they being able to hold the community accountable to following up and to closing loops. I think the last thing I want to share here is that in looking at the challenges students were going to face, we also have to be aware that it's not just physical, right? It's mental, and that the pandemic will have lasting impact, which could look like disengagement, right? Which could look like a scholar not being verbal every time you ask a question. And how do we as a school community sort of hear that, right? And be able to mirror back other ways of safely and consistently engaging. So success coaching has been our one of the marquee adjustments we've made, centering student voice, student well-being, and the impact of the pandemic.